What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are finally here. We are finally here at Secret Wars issue number 1, the start of Secret Wars 2015. And I am so excited here. I am so psyched because Marvel has basically taken the axe to all but like 10 people from the Earth 616 universe. Everybody else is dead. It's insane what they've done here. So if you guys recall in our last video, what we had talked about was that with the incursion beginning to happen, with the incursion taking place between the Earth 616 universe and the Ultimate Universe, that if one of the planets wasn't destroyed, if one of the Earths wasn't destroyed, that both realities were going to be destroyed entirely. And so in response to this, Nick Fury from the Ultimate Universe launched an invasion against the Earth 616 universe in order to annihilate the superheroes and destroy that Earth so that both universes could continue to exist. And so this is where the story picks up. The story basically picks up here where the invasion is taking place. Now, in the midst of this invasion, we see a multitude of heroes. It's basically all hands on deck. The Guardians of the Galaxy are present. The X-Men are present. Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Danny Rand, Carol Danvers, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four. All these different characters have all popped up from all over the planet Earth to try to stave off this invasion. But what's also taking place here is that Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four are trying to organize this multiversal life raft. Again, this is a life raft that's basically been designed to house a certain number of people, presumably around 60, that will allow all these individuals to survive the collapse of the multiverse should it take place, and then survive into the next, whatever the next multiverse happens to be. And so what we find here is that there eventually comes a point whereby it seems as though nothing can be done, that too much time has passed. It's impossible to destroy the Earth from the Ultimate Universe without destroying both Earths in the process, simply because of their proximity and the fact that if the Ultimate Universe version of the Earth, or if the main Earth was destroyed, it would simply just blow up both of them, just due to the fact that the explosion would be so extreme. And so what happens here is the Fantastic Four and Black Panther effectively use the multiversal life raft to begin reaching out to the various heroes that they need that will help them move on into the next multiverse. And so the following heroes are picked up. The following heroes continue to be part of what we'll see going into Battleworld. We see Peter Quill joins this team along with the all-new female version of Thor, followed by Peter Parker Spider-Man, Carol Danvers, and Cyclops, who has basically re-ingested or retaken back on the Phoenix Force. And this is it. This is all we get. Now, of course, this is in addition to the Fantastic Four and to Black Panther, but this is really all we see. These are the only characters. These about 9 or 10 people are the only ones from the main Earth 616 universe that are presumably going to live on into whatever this new Battleworld is going to be. And so what happens here is that while the group is trying to make their escape, trying to simply survive the collision of both of these Earths, that there's all kinds of electrical storms, there's all kinds of chaos due to the instability of these realities colliding with one another, and that during this time, the section which basically holds Susan Storm, Johnny Storm, Ben Grimm, and the Fantastic Four's children is ripped away. And so what happens is Reed Richards tries to launch this kind of rescue attempt in the sense that he tells T'Challa to lower the shields. Now, initially, T'Challa doesn't want to, and the reason being because if they did, it might cause some kind of instability within the ship, and it would end up destroying the multiversal life raft entirely. And so what he says is that he'll be able to lower it down for 5 seconds, but after that 5 seconds is up, if the integrity of the ship goes below 90%, then he's going to have to raise the shield regardless of what's happened. And so once the shield goes down, Reed Richards tries to reach out to Susan Storm and to grab that section of the ship, but right before he gets there, that section of the ship disintegrates entirely. And so basically, Reed Richards is the only member of the Fantastic Four left. Everybody else has been completely annihilated. And so what we find is that as everything seems to come to an end, as this entire multiverse begins to collapse and to basically be destroyed, that we see that this multiversal life raft seems to land on what this new battle world is. I guess on the formation of the conglomeration of all these different realities that have been merged on to what battle world is going to be. But again, this is all we get. We don't really know what's going to happen next. The only indication we have is from what Marvel has told us through various interviews and so on, that Secret Wars issue number 2 is going to cover all these different realities. But the fact remains, in terms of the Earth 616 portion of Battleworld, that is to say, the portion of Battleworld that's going to house the characters that were previously part of the Earth 616 continuity, these are the only ones we're going to see. That we're going to see Reed Richards, we're going to see Black Panther, we're going to see Carol Danvers, Cyclops with the Phoenix Force, Peter Parker Spider-Man, the all-new version of Thor, Peter Quill, and maybe one or two other people. But that's it. This is all we have left. So keeping with our series of videos on Secret Wars, we pick up now with Secret Wars number 2. And I want to tell you guys right now, this is a damn good story. So where Secret Wars number 1 concluded with the end of everything, the end of the Marvel Multiverse, and the destruction of presumably a multitude of characters, Secret Wars number 2 picks up with the beginning of Battleworld, with the beginning of everything. Now, as we get into this video, what I want to make clear here is that some of the things that we're going to see in this video, we're simply just not going to have answers to yet. We don't know what a lot of these things will turn into. And so while I'm sure you guys will have a lot of questions, I'll answer them as best I can, but some of them we just don't have an answer to. What I also want you guys to keep in mind here is that the notion of alternate realities is no longer part of the equation, that there's no more Earth 616, there's no more Ultimate Universe, there's no more Marvel Zombies universe, none of that stuff. Instead, there's simply just Battleworld. And so over the course of this video, while I reference things like Earth 616, and while I reference things like the Ultimate Universe, that's simply just to give you guys perspective. That's to help you guys understand these characters in reference to who they used to be as opposed to who they are now. So what we do as we start this series is we pick up with some young man who has successfully lifted the hammer of Thor, which is basically our introduction to the Thor Corps. As is explained to us by Odin Thor, who appears to be basically the leader of the Thor Corps is essentially the police force of Battleworld, and they carry out the will of the god of Battleworld, or of this reality, who's actually revealed to us to be Doctor Doom. And what we also do is we join Odin Thor as he takes this newest recruit of the Thor Corps on a tour of Battleworld. What we're given is this sort of origin story, where prior to the existence of Battleworld, there was nothing, and then everything came into existence, presumably at the hands of Doctor Doom. What this basically telling us here is that the Thor Corps are pretty much unaware of anything having ever existed before the end of the Marvel Multiverse and the establishment of Battleworld. Now again, we don't know this for a fact, this just appears to be the case. More so than that, we don't know if anybody else on Battleworld believes this. At this moment, it's simply just given to us. This seems to be the perspective of the Thor Corps. But what we do is we find that in the Kingdom of Utopolis, we actually move away from the Thor Corps here, and we find that we pick up with the Captain Britain Corps. And the Captain Britain Corps under the Kingdom of Utopolis appear to have several scientists that have uncovered some kind of a vessel. And this vessel appears to be the raft that was used by Reed Richards and the various heroes from Earth 616 to escape the collapse of that universe, the destruction of everything, and survive into the creation of Battleworld and this new reality. Now from here, we rejoin, Odin Thor. We re-pick up with his character and this recruit as they arrive at Bar Sinister, which is the kingdom of Mr. Sinister. And again, as they basically exist to carry out the law of doom, this is what they're doing. What we're told is that Sinister has been ordered ordered to the presence to appear before Doctor Doom himself. And again, this really seems to give us some very a large amount of insight into the role that Doctor Doom plays as the god of Battleworld, in the sense that it seems as though Doctor Doom is really believed to be this kind of god, because what happens here is Sinister makes no attempt to refuse the order to appear before Doom. In the Earth 616 continuity, Sinister was a character who really didn't take orders from anybody. He really just kind of did his own thing. But in this circumstance, when he's ordered to appear before Doctor Doom, while he is very cavalier about it, while he has a lot of attitude about it, he still does it. And so the second thing that we learn here is that it appears that Marvel's basically chosen some of the most prominent villains from the Earth 616 continuity to be the leaders of, to be the leader of these different kingdoms within Battleworld. Of course, Mr. Sinister, being one of the more prominent members of Earth 616, is the leader of Bar Sinister itself. And so again, what we find is that we basically pick up with the arrival of the Thor Corps at what's referred to as Doomstat, which is the home of Doctor Doom. And it appears as though this place is guarded by some form of Galactus. Now, this is a little bit different from the Galactus that we're used to, in the sense that this version of Galactus is on fire. He has a fiery head and so on and so forth. But again, this simply just appears to be some version of the Galactus character. And at some point along the line, we may get a little more information about this. But what we end up doing here is once we join Doom inside, or I guess join the Thor Corps and Sinister inside of Doomstat, Doctor Strange is revealed to us to be the Sheriff of Battleworld, who basically upholds the laws of Doom across all of the kingdoms. If for any reason a dispute arises between the rulers of these various kingdoms, the dispute itself is settled within the House of Doom in order to basically maintain peace and to keep kingdoms from waging war against each other and devolving Battleworld into a state of chaos. What we're told is that Sinister apparently has allied himself with Hyperion, the ruler of the kingdom of the Squadron Supreme, and that the intention of them seems to be to overthrow Jamie Braddock, who is the leader of Utopolis. Now, as a result, Jamie Braddock has basically requested a hearing in front of Dr. Doom to settle this matter, to settle this dispute. But the problem is that while Sinister basically lies to maintain his innocence, he's eventually found guilty by Doctor Strange. And so as a result, Sinister basically chooses to challenge Brian Braddock, the brother of Jamie Braddock, to a battle to the death. Now, while we're told that Sinister has the right to earn his innocence by battling someone to the death, we're not told why he's able to challenge Brian Braddock instead of the person who's accusing him, Jamie Braddock. But I'd go as far as to say here that most likely because Sinister is a representation of his own territory, or possibly because he's the one being challenged, he has the right to challenge anybody from the kingdom that's challenging him. And so in this instance, he chose to challenge Brian Braddock. But again, I don't really have any confirmation for this. I have no real basis for this. It's just kind of a theory on my part to sort of make this make sense in my own mind. But regardless, the result is that during the fight, Sinister appears to be victorious. But before he's able to deal the killing blow, he's basically stopped by Dr. Doom. And the reason for this is, I guess as Doom explains, because Doom's basically uncovered some knowledge which indicates that there are individuals who have been plotting against his position, and that these individuals may exist inside the kingdom of Utopolis. And so while Jimmy Braddock claims a lack of knowledge, well, he says he doesn't really know anything about this, what Doom says is that if Jimmy Braddock is the ruler of Utopolis, then as a king of that area, he should know everything that's going on within his kingdom. And that failure to achieve this, failure to do so, means that he's basically not fit to be the king. And so the result is that Doom, at the behest of Susan Storm, has Jamie Braddock taken away, Brian Braddock elevated to the position of the king of Utopolis, and Sinister sentenced to a series of lashes. Now, what I want to do here is I want to take a break from this entire segment for a second, and I want to talk about Susan Storm. And the reason why is because, as we know with Secret Wars #1, it appeared that all of the members of the Fantastic Four, with the exception of Reed Richards, had been killed when the universe collapsed, when their lifeboat had basically kind of broken away and so on. But it appears that Dr. Doom has saved them. And so while we don't really know where Ben Grimm or where Johnny Storm is, what we do know is that Franklin Richards, Valeria Richards, and Susan Storm are alive. Now, we don't know if some of the other individuals that we've seen, for example, Mr. Sinister or some of those other characters, were saved by Dr. Doom. We simply just know that they're here. But regardless, what we do here is we pick up with the Thor Corps as they prepare to deliver Jimmy Braddock to his fate after Jimmy Braddock was basically sentenced by Dr. Doom. And what happens is the group arrives at the Shield Wall, which appears to be a giant wall stretching the entire length of Battleworld, which seems very similar to the Great Wall of China here. But what happens is Jamie Braddock, being sentenced, is basically thrown over the wall. And so what we learn is that on the other side of this wall, which is designed to isolate or to protect all the kingdoms of Battleworld, there consists 3 groups. The first group are the zombies from the Marvel Zombie universe. The second group is the Annihilation Wave and Annihilus himself. And the third group appears to be just a vast number of robots. Now, what Odin basically tells his recruit here is that it appears as though somewhere along the line that when this wall was built, that various people had been placed there to defend it, and they've been defending it for years, and that people had died. So again, it seems as though if Doom really did create Battleworld, if he really did create this reality, then perhaps he planted the thoughts in the minds of all its inhabitants that they've been here for as long as they can remember, or that for some reason this is really just kind of a temporal thing. Again, this is really kind of confusing here, and we don't really have an answer to this question, although I'm sure that as time progresses, we'll understand why it is that Odin Thor believes that he's been here for years, when in fact, this isn't the case. And the reason why this is not the case is because what happens is we jump back to the scientists from the kingdom of Utopolis who were investigating this raft that appeared to belong to the survivors of Earth 616. But what's revealed to us is that the Thor Corps, or at least a small contingent of the Thor Corps, had been assigned here to basically bring an end to this excavation, to take all the items that had been uncovered by the scientists and to take them back to Castle Doom. But what ends up happening is one of the scientists basically opens this raft, opens this ship, and when it does, it's revealed to us this is not the ship that belongs to Earth 616. Instead, it's the ship that belonged to the Ultimate Universe, Reed Richards, Thanos, and the Cabal. And so what happens is Thanos and the Cabal come out and immediately incapacitate this small contingent of the Thor Corps. We then see that Thanos is basically confused about where he's at. He doesn't understand where this world is, how this world got there, or how they even got there. And so what happens is Thanos basically questions the scientist, and the scientist says that while this place is referred to under a multitude of different names, depending on who it is that you're talking to, if it's a highborn, it's referred to as one name. If it is a common person, they refer to it as Battleworld. What this basically means here is that either a very long amount of time has passed between the collapse of the universe and the birth of this new universe, which would explain why Odin Thor says that they've been protecting it for years, or it could simply just be that almost no time has passed. This reality came into existence, and then now Thanos and these individuals are coming out of the raft. Again, this is a little confusing here, but again, as we continue with the Secret Wars story, this will all be made to make sense, so I have no doubt about that. So as we get into Secret Wars number 3, keep in mind that we're going to be running over these as they're released to us, and so we may find that there are relatively large gaps between each telling of this story, but what we're going to find in this portion of the story is we're going to receive a large bit of information regarding the origin of Battleworld. Having said that, in Secret Wars number 2, if you recall, we were given this sort of tour of Battleworld in that we learned that the Thor Corps is composed of alternate versions of Thor and individuals from alternate realities that were deemed worthy of wielding Thor's hammer, and that the Thor Corps itself basically functions as the police force of this new Battleworld. Now, what we also learned was that Dr. Doom had apparently constructed Battleworld, although we weren't really told how this was done, but due to the vast power that he seems to possess, Doom operates as the ruler of Battleworld as a god, with Doctor Strange, acting as the sheriff and second in command to Dr. Doom. What we also learned was that under Doom are a series of barons, with each ruling their own section of Battleworld under their own authority, although there is some measure of what they can and can't do. Now, at the end of the last story, if you recall, we discovered that the life raft used by the Ultimate Universe to escape the collapse of the multiverse was discovered and accidentally opened, resulting in Thanos, Maximus the Mad, Namor the Submariner, and the rest of the Cabal basically escaping and getting out into Battleworld proper. Now from here, we jump to Doctor Strange as he investigates the raft that Thanos and the Cabal emerged from. And after speaking with several members of the Thor Corps, Doctor Strange tells them to basically search out and to find the Cabal, but to bring them back alive. What we also find is that Doctor Strange realizes that not everyone who was on board the raft left with Thanos, revealing that Miles Morales had actually stowed away and didn't seem to be detected by the Cabal themselves. In addition to this, as Miles begins to explain how it was he came to be on the raft, Doctor Strange actually stops him once he realizes that Miles Morales remembers everything before and during the collapse of the multiverse. Now from here, we transition to Doctor Strange, the newest Thor recruit, and Miles Morales inside of what's referred to as the Hidden Isle of Agamotto, which is to say Doctor Strange's own territory that's hidden away from the eyes of everybody else, presumably with the exception of Doctor Doom. What we're told here is that Doctor Strange was actually able to preserve elements of the main Marvel Universe version of the planet Earth within his own sanctum sanctorum, but that he's also in possession of the raft that was used by the heroes of the main Marvel Universe to escape the collapse of the multiverse. And after Thor is able to actually open the raft at the request of Doctor Strange, the group is initially greeted by Peter Parker, Carol Danvers, Jane Foster, Thor, and Star-Lord. Now, the initial response by both Doctor Strange and the remnants of the Earth 616 superheroes is one of skepticism, in that they don't know if they can trust the others or not. But when the group is actually joined by Scott Summers as the Phoenix, Black Panther, and Reed Richards, Doctor Strange becomes convinced that these are indeed his friends. And so what we do is we get this sort of explanation from Doctor Strange with regards to how it was that Battleworld came into existence. What Doctor Strange tells them is that they've all been in stasis inside this raft for about 8 years or so, and that when the multiverse collapsed, Doom began reaching out to what was left of the multiverse and began rounding up various pieces of those Earths to form Battleworld. Now keep in mind, as Doctor Strange is giving this explanation, he's not actually referring to Doctor Doom, he's simply referring to this being as God. Now in addition to this, no one on Battleworld, with the exception of a handful of people, have any idea of what their past universe was like or that it even existed. As far as they're concerned, they basically just came into existence with Battleworld. And the reason why they believe this is because quite literally Doctor Doom had modified their memories. Now when Reed Richards asked the question who this God is, this is when Doctor Strange reveals that it's Victor Von Doom, that Doctor Doom had effectively saved all of their lives. Now from here we switch back to the Cabal as they continue to figure out this new world, and as the group basically kind of sits around and they kind of eat and they debate and so on, the consensus among those talking is that they should not have killed all the versions of Thor, and instead they should have basically questioned those members of the Thor Corps who were present. But the result is that Thanos responds by simply saying that they will have all the answers they seek shortly. And when the question's asked how it is that Thanos knows this, Thanos simply says that he's looking up. And so what this basically tells us is that the Thor Corps, as it was assigned by Doctor Strange to track down the Cabal, has successfully done so. And it seems as though the Thor Corps is basically descending on Thanos and his Cabal, and this is where the story ends. We're kind of left to find out what happens next in issue number 4. So what I want to do here is cover the 4th part of Marvel's Secret Wars. But because we've already done a video on why Secret Wars was launched in the first place, and because of the fact that we don't yet know what the fallout of the conclusion of this comic is going to be, what we're going to do here is we're just going to basically cover the story. And as the events unfold in future publications, we'll tie those in to give a more well-rounded understanding of what all's going on here. In Secret Wars number 3, we had discussed that following the collapse of the multiverse, Ultimate Universe Reed Richards, Thanos, Namor the Submariner, and the rest of the Cabal from the mainstream Marvel Universe had escaped the collapse using a raft from the Ultimate Universe itself. In addition to this, Peter Parker, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, Thor, Jane Foster, Star-Lord, Scott Summers as the Phoenix Force, and Reed Richards had all survived the collapse in a second raft from the mainstream Marvel Universe. And while 8 years had passed on the outside, only a few hours had passed inside the rafts. And so when Thanos' group emerged, and after being met with the arrival of a contingent of the Thor Corps, operating as the police of Battleworld, Thanos and the Cabal killed all of them and then left the area. Now where Secret Wars number 3 had ended on the arrival of the remaining Thor Corps after tracking down Thanos and his group following their massacre, the Secret Wars number 4 picks up with Doctor Strange providing a narrative relating to the formation of this new world. What Doctor Strange tells us is that following the multiversal collapse, Doom, Doctor Strange, and the Molecule Man Owen Reese had killed the Beyonders, the orchestrators of the great multiversal collapse. In taking their power, Doom reshaped reality and formed Battleworld in the process by taking what was left of alternate universes and placing them in a singular location, although we're not told exactly how it was he was able to accomplish all of this. While Doctor Strange serves Doom as his second in command, his stance on the function of Battleworld seems to be a disappointment in that his view of the world, being a place of constant struggle and strife, is a far cry from what it should have actually been. Now while the group debates the decision of Doctor Strange in turning away from omnipotence and allowing Doom to take the mantle instead, the hammer of one of the Thor Corps recruits lights up, indicating a request for aid from those battling Thanos. At this point, the story transitions to one of the Thor Corps members speaking directly with Doom, informing him that the battle with Thanos goes poorly. While the group may be successful, it would cost the lives of many of the Thor Corps members in order to defeat Thanos himself. In addition to this, when Valeria Richards is asked by Doom to use her vast intelligence to analyze the situation, Valeria states that the result of this battle is impossible to determine. The power wielded by Thanos from the mainstream Marvel Universe dwarfs any of his alternate reality counterparts that currently exist on Battleworld. While Doom states that such a conflict is below his concern, Susan Storm tells him that the power demonstrated by these individuals goes beyond everyone present on Battleworld save Doom himself and maybe Doctor Strange. While Doom debates whether to act or not, he witnesses the arrival of Doctor Strange on the battlefield alongside the heroes from the mainstream Marvel Universe and Miles Morales from the Ultimate Universe. However, with the arrival of Doctor Strange and his forces also comes the arrival of Reed Richards from the mainstream Marvel Universe, and after stating that he had spent years searching every corner of Battleworld for him, Doom states that he's finally managed to find him. Taking this time to act, Doom appears on the battlefield confronting all forces involved. While he explains to Reed that his new power makes him a virtual god, Thanos responds by simply stating that there exists a difference between playing God and truly being a god. In addition to this, Scott Summers attacks Dr. Doom, stating that Doom is like every man playing with a power that he doesn't understand. With the planet being composed of a multitude of realities, each one home to its own occupants, Doom has forced himself into the role of a leader with no true understanding of what it means to lead. Now, while Scott Summers is able to hold his own against Doom for a time, Doom's able to overpower Scott Summers and in the process seizes him by the neck and breaks it, killing him in the process. During the entire conflict between Doom and Scott Summers, however, Doctor Strange takes the opportunity to use his power and send the various heroes and villains away to various places in Battleworld, although we don't know how. Now, when asked by Doom as to why he had done this, Doctor Strange simply replies that Doom would have inevitably killed them all due to the fact that they would never have bent their knees to his power. And furthermore, Doctor Strange touches on the inherent fear of Doom in that after all the power that he's gained and his stance as a ruler of this new reality, that in the end, he still fears Reed Richards. And so in response to what seems to be the incorrigible nature or perhaps the insubordinate nature of Doctor Strange, Dr. Doom kills him entirely. So starting off with the funeral of Doctor Strange, there are a few key things here I would like you to pay special attention to. The first is the eulogy that's being given. The unnamed man of the Thor Corps tells us that in the beginning there was nothing, and that the great god Doom had created everything, and alongside him stood his first disciple in the form of Doctor Strange. If you notice, there's no mention of the Molecule Man, the third man who stood beside Doom and Strange in the battle against the Beyonders in order to save the multiverse. Now this is something I'd like you to keep in the back of your head because this will become particularly important as we continue with this part of the event. The next thing I'd like you to take notice of is Franklin Richards. When the funeral proceedings complete, Franklin Richards offers a gift to the statue of Doctor Strange in the form of a leaf that he turns into a wreath. Now again, this is also important because Jonathan Hickman is telling us that Franklin Richards still has the power to warp reality. Furthermore, because Jonathan Hickman's stories all tie into each other, with the events of Franklin Richards making Galactus' herald during the Future Foundation in the mainstream continuity, it's entirely possible that this version of Franklin Richards does possess the same power. Now, whether this power rivals that of Dr. Doom is unknown, but what Franklin tells us is that he plans revenge against whoever it was that killed Doctor Strange, indicating that a battle will take place somewhere along the line between Franklin Richards and Dr. Doom. Now the story begins to transition away a bit and focus on Valeria Richards. As a daughter of Susan and Reed, Valeria was a character that had a level of intelligence comparable to both her father and Dr. Doom. As such, while she expresses feelings to Doom that her actions of having previously notified Doctor Strange about the survivors of the Ultimate Universe led him down the path that resulted in his death, she remains unaware that it was actually Doom who killed Strange. Furthermore, in her mind and the mind of everyone else, it is believed that the survivors of the mainstream and the Ultimate Universe continuities were actually the ones who had killed Strange. And so the question lingers that if Doom himself had arrived to fight alongside Doctor Strange, how was it that the survivors got away? While Doom seems to beat around the bush here in stating that no one had escaped, the explanation he offers on why they've not been captured is that in his current mindset, if he were to seek them out, he would immediately destroy them in his own grief. Now, while this is clearly a lie, Jonathan Hickman leaves this a little ambiguous as to whether or not Valeria believes it. And so in an effort to distract her thoughts from Doom's involvement, or for some reason or another, Doom tasks Valeria Richards with tracking down the survivors of the mainstream and the Ultimate Universe continuities. Now continuing on, Jonathan Hickman continues this trend of revealing important aspects of the events following the collapse of the multiverse when we learn that the Molecule Man Owen Reese is actually still alive. Now this is perhaps the most important aspect of the story because this gives us some insight into how Battleworld formed, how it functioned prior to the death of Stephen Strange, and how his death will change everything going forward. Now I'd like you to pay special attention to the words Hickman uses here. devourer, hunger, and so on. While this could simply mean that Owen Reese is quite literally hungry for physical food, the running theory among fans is that Molecule Man is set to be the new Galactus. Again, while this is a theory, it seems supported in the information that follows. But what Hickman does here is seemingly retcon the creation of everything. Where previously it was believed that the enigma known as the One Above All was the driving force behind everything in existence, what Hickman seems to be telling us here is that the Beyonders themselves had created all things, including the multiverse. In addition to this, Hickman provides a bit of consolidation regarding the events that led up to the multiversal collapse. With the Beyonders having looked at their multiverse and making the decision to basically start over, the Molecule Man was created and then split into an infinite number of versions of himself, which were all placed in every reality across the infinite expanse of the multiverse. Using his ability to control the molecules of all things, the Beyonders sought to destroy every version of Molecule Man simultaneously, which would bring an end to everything and allow the Beyonders to basically start anew. However, learning of their plan, Doom and Owen Reese concocted their own plan to destroy each version of Owen Reese in order to preserve the multiverse. But a byproduct of this action was that with each version of Molecule Man that was killed in an alternate reality, the mainstream Molecule Man grew more and more insane since he was effectively losing more and more of himself. And so with time running short, Doom, Strange, and Owen Reese abandoned their plan and instead began collecting Molecule Man from the realities that hadn't been destroyed. Now during their final battle with the Beyonders, the captured versions of Molecule Man were dispersed into the Beyonders and detonated like bombs. And so with the Beyonders dead but their powers still present, Doom, Strange, and the last remaining Owen Reese captured their power, seeking to use it in order to preserve what was left. Using fragments of the world that he had traveled during his time killing the Molecule Man, Doom pieced these fragments together and formed Battleworld. In addition to this, the power of the Beyonders was simply too much for Doom or Doctor Strange to control, and so using Owen Reese as a conduit, the power of the Beyonders is channeled through the Molecule Man and possessed by Doom. However, what Hickman tells us is that where Dr. Doom acted as the power of Battleworld, he was not all-knowing and relied on Doctor Strange to operate as an eyes and ears. But because Doctor Strange is now dead, Doom is virtually blind to all things going on in Battleworld, which has effectively started a chain reaction that will eventually lead to its total destruction. Now transitioning back to Valeria Richards, we join with the Future Foundation. As a group that was established in Hickman's run of the Fantastic Four, the Future Foundation operated as a group of the world's brightest minds, both young and old, in order to solve the world's problems. While the group as it exists now is composed of a fraction of its original population, under Valeria Richards, they established a couple of important things for us. The first is that everything on Battleworld is composed of what they refer to as God Particles, or the power of Doom. While we know this to be the power of the Beyonders, the Future Foundation doesn't, and so they simply state that everything on Battleworld is composed of this energy. Now while this might be a bit of a stretch here, I would be willing to go out on a limb and say that Hickman is telling us that rather than Doom piecing Battleworld together from what was left of the multiverse, instead, all of the realities that exist on Battleworld were created by Doom using the power of the Beyonders. And furthermore, as it's stated here, where Dr. Doom's power was rooted in the Beyonders, the power of Stephen Strange was rooted in magic. As a result, when Stephen Strange wished the survivors of the mainstream and Ultimate Universe continuities away and was subsequently killed by Doom, the machines of the Future Foundation registered 2 spikes of energy, one by Doom and one by Doctor Strange. Using the timeline of when these energies spiked, the group seems to come to the realization that Doom killed Strange. But as Valeria states, all information gathered on the investigation will stay with the group. And so as we bring this issue of Secret Wars to a close, we find Thanos facing the shield which separates the rest of Battleworld from the Marvel Zombies and Ultron, indicating that Thanos intends to use these forces for his own ends. So getting into Secret Wars Part 6, in truth, this comic is actually a little light on content in comparison to what we've seen so far. Where issue number 4 saw the death of Stephen Strange and the dispersing of the various survivors from the Earth 616 and Ultimate Universe continuities, issue number 6 continues the trend of their investigations into what took place between the collapse of the multiverse and the formation of Battleworld under Dr. Doom. Picking up 3 weeks after issue number 5, which concluded with Thanos standing at the wall separating Battleworld from the Marvel Zombies and Ultron army, issue number 6 opens up with Dr. Doom and Valeria Richards examining the bodies of Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight. Conveniently, what Hickman does here is give us a bit of information regarding who these two are by way of Black Swan. To provide a little context for the new people, When Doctor Doom had begun the process of attempting to defeat the Beyonders' efforts to destroy the multiverse, he had amassed an army to help with the task, which were called the Black Swans. As the sole survivor of the group, this woman took the name Black Swan as a singular identity, and along with a handful of others, survived the collapse of the multiverse. Transitioning back to the story, we learned that over the course of the last 3 weeks, various territories within Battleworld have begun to rise up against Doom, and while none of them possess the power to destroy him outright, their efforts have been driven towards gaining the power necessary to do so. Furthermore, despite having been tasked with finding the surviving superheroes from before the collapse of the multiverse, Valeria Richards had been unable to achieve this task, but as we discovered in issue number 5, she along with several others have been working against Dr. Doom to end his rule, indicating that she's most likely lying here. This sentiment is actually compounded on when the story transitions to the Foundation. As a group that appeared during Hickman's run of the Fantastic Four and was actually referred to as the Future Foundation, the purpose of the Future Foundation was to bring the world's top minds together in an effort to develop various technologies to ensure a brighter future for the world. However, when the collapse of the multiverse happened, the individuals that we see here were the only members of the Foundation that seemed to have survived. Furthermore, because Valeria has a level of intelligence on par with both Reed and Doom, while she had not figured out everything that was going on, at the very least, she speculated that Doom had killed Doctor Strange rather than the survivors of Earth 616 and the Ultimate Universe continuities. As a result, she and the rest of the Foundation began to focus their efforts on discovering the source of Doom's power, as well as putting the pieces together regarding the battle that took place, resulting in the death of Cyclops as the Phoenix, the vanishing of the survivors, and the death of Doctor Strange. Picking up with both versions of Reed Richards from the Earth 616 continuity and the Ultimate Universe, the conversation between the two serves to establish the dichotomy of their outlooks on life and their moral views. For 616 Reed, the defeat of Doom would likely result in his death, which draws a series of questions regarding what would happen next. However, for the Ultimate Reed, the only issue at hand is the destruction of Doom, with everything else existing as a secondary. Now this as a whole isn't wildly important, and all it really does is provide us with their differing perspectives, but also sets up Ultimate Reed to continue his role as the villain the Maker, going into all new, all different Marvel. Furthermore, the discussion between the two reveals that the insurgency within Battleworld is not a disorganized revolt among the various territories. Instead, someone referred to as the Prophet is leading these territories to freedom by helping them to revolt and then defeating the members of the Thor Corps when they arrive to restore order. In addition to this, we learn that 616 Reed is aware that his wife Susan, his daughter Valeria, and his son Franklin serve at the pleasure of Doom, and while their memories appear to have been altered in a manner that keeps them from recalling their lives before Battleworld, on a personal level, 616 Reed recognizes that unless Doom is defeated, he will effectively have lost his family. Transitioning to Castle Doom proper, what we find is that Peter Parker and Miles Morales have been tasked with locating the source of Doom's power, presumably by Reed Richards. However, as the two investigate the means by which Doom accesses his power, the two were joined by Valeria Richards, who reveals the access point. In addition to this, the modification of her memories by Doom are confirmed when Peter recognizes who she is, but she does not recognize him and doesn't know anyone by the name of Reed Richards. And so as the three begin to talk, Valeria admits that she was willing to help Miles and Peter access the source, so long as they answer the question of who it was that actually killed Doctor Strange during the battle. Confirming her belief that it was indeed Dr. Doom, Valeria lives up to her end of the bargain and provides the two with the passage they seek. Descending into the white-hot room, the two come face to face with Owen Reese. Providing him with a hamburger that's been in the pocket of Miles Morales for several weeks, Hickman toys with us a little bit by hinting at the idea that even if Reese isn't Galactus per se, at the very least, the hunger he suffers from is akin to Galactus in that he consumed everything that existed within the white space. Now, what the contents of this area was is unknown, and Hickman never actually tells us, but when Peter and Miles ask Owen about the source of Doom's power, Reese responds that he himself serves this purpose. Now again, this is really Hickman just leaving things ambiguous and will most likely be revealed at the end of the story, but for the sake of having a little fun, I would hazard a guess that when Doctor Strange, Owen Reese, and Dr. Doom stood against the Beyonders at the end of everything, because Reese had the power to manipulate the molecules of all things in existence, he most likely defeated the Beyonders, absorbed their power, and now exists as a way for Doom to control Battleworld. And so picking up at the Isle of Agamotto, which serves as Doctor Strange's home, the story begins to get a little more interesting when we join Black Panther and Namor the Submariner. After entering, the two are met with a magical vision of Doctor Strange, allowing them to continue once they've proven their identities by providing a password. Doctor Strange goes on to tell them that if they're seeing this message, it's due to the fact that he's died. As such, he left his personal artifacts to only his most trusted friends. The first object is the Siege Courageous. Unlike the Siege Perilous, which allows an individual to step through and have their entire life reset while being transported to another location, the Siege Courageous allows transport in the same fashion without the loss of one's memories. The second object, however, is far more powerful and comes in the form of the Infinity Gauntlet. As he explains, because Battleworld is a singular reality composed of multiple other realities, the Infinity Stones were pulled from these various territories to form the Gauntlet, which will work if it's used. Now, picking up with Susan Storm and Franklin, her recollection of the events during the early days of Battleworld come in the form of a bedtime story, but also give us one interpretation of what has happened. Beginning with the formation of the Fantastic Four, the events that took place leading to the development of their powers remains the same, except that instead of Reed Richards leading the group, instead, as far as Susan is concerned, it was led by her father, Franklin Storm. Now, her recollection of these events is most likely due to Dr. Doom modifying her memories to ensure that her recollection of Reed does not interfere with her perspective of the world as Doom had created it. But as the story goes, the Fantastic Four existed on Earth and fought villains. However, when the multiverse collapse took place and Battleworld came into existence, the environment was harsh and only the strongest were able to survive amidst the chaos. During this time, Franklin Storm had been killed, and during the pandemonium, Doom had appeared under the desire to bring order to the chaos. However, before we find out anything else, Susan ends the story and sends Franklin off to bed. And so, picking up with Thanos, the insurgency within Battleworld and the various individuals within continues as we find him speaking directly with Ben Grimm. During the conversation, Grimm reveals that when Battleworld had taken form and order was restored by Doom, because the Marvel zombies and the Ultron robots were so dangerous and would ruin the existence of everything else, Doom had requested that Ben Grimm allow himself to serve as the wall, protecting Battleworld from these threats. However, Thanos counters this by stating that this request from Doom was a ruse for two reasons. The first is that with all the power he possesses, Doom could simply eliminate the Marvel zombies and the Ultron robots with almost no effort. The second is because, like Johnny Storm, Doom felt threatened. The reason being that prior to the collapse of the multiverse, Ben Grimm existed as part of the Fantastic Four and worked to thwart the various schemes of Doom. Furthermore, while Ben does not remember any of this, because he wasn't affected by the memory modifications that Doom employed, Thanos does. In addition, it seems that at some point in the past, Johnny Storm became aware of what was happening, and as a result, Doom cast him into the sky to exist as the sun. Feeding on Ben Grimm's pride and recognition that what Thanos says is true, the story comes to an end as Ben Grimm seemingly abandons his role as the wall, separating the Marvel zombies and the Ultron robots from everyone else, and joins in the uprising against Doom's rule over Battleworld. So, continuing our discussion on Secret Wars, the events in this story provide us with some insight into what happened to the various characters who were transported across Battleworld by Doctor Strange prior to his death at the hands of Doom, but also brings the rumblings of revolution into full swing. Before we get into this though, something I want to touch on here are the territories of Bar Sinister, Inferno, and Age of Apocalypse, due to the fact that the armies of these three territories will be a major part of the revolution in this story. Bar Sinister is pretty straightforward in that it's run by Mr. Sinister, presumably the version from the main Marvel universe, and occupied entirely of clones of himself. Inferno is a territory based on the 1988 story of the same name, where it was revealed that a woman named Madeline Pryor was a clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister and introduced after Jean Grey died in an effort to procreate with Scott Summers and produce a child with incredible power who would actually go on to become Cabal. During the Inferno event, Madeline Pryor had lost her mind after learning that she was a clone and in turn, allied herself with demons from the dimension of Limbo, attempted an invasion and takeover of Earth, but ultimately failed. However, in terms of the Battleworld territory and the character that we'll see in this story, this version of Madeline hails from a universe where she was successful in taking over the world. Finally, Age of Apocalypse is another straightforward story which focuses on a universe where Apocalypse was never destroyed by Magneto during the Age of Apocalypse event, and instead, continued to rule the world. Now in terms of Secret Wars, when we covered issues 4 and 5, I had left out a couple of segments since they didn't play a major role at the time, but because of the events taking place in part 7, we need to jump back and cover a couple of these things. In issue number 4, when Doctor Strange had stood against Doom over the fact that he had created Battleworld as a testing ground rather than a utopia, during the conflict, Strange had teleported the survivors of the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe to different locations across Battleworld. Where issues 5 and 6 largely focus on both versions of Reed Richards from the Ultimate Universe and main Marvel Universe respectively, as well as Peter Parker and Miles Morales in their efforts to locate the source of Doom's power and eliminate it, the story also explained what happened to Jane Foster Thor, Carol Danvers, Black Panther, and Namor the Submariner. While it's only given over a single page, Jane Foster had been transported to Doomguard, the location where the Thor Corps resides as a police force of Battleworld under Doom. Black Panther and Namor the Submariner had been transported to Egyptia, a section of Battleworld from a universe where Moses never led an exodus from Egypt, and Carol Danvers had been sent to Bar Sinister. In addition to this, with our last video, we had touched on the idea of an enigmatic being named the Prophet leading a revolution in Battleworld. Taking a sort of Game of Thrones attitude to the story, Hickman established that on its face, the Barons of Battleworld under Doom were all loyal without question, but in truth, were completely split down the middle. Now, something I want to do here real quick is talk about Maestro. With a future imperfect story saw him stuck in his own head and destined to spend the rest of his life believing that he had defeated Doom, in the main Secret Wars story, he's in his normal form and perfectly aware of everything that's going on. While Hickman may or may not explain how this happened, this particular issue is one of the reasons why tie-ins can be a problem for major stories. There's no real unifying element except for the story itself. And so we don't really have a choice here but to assume that either the tie-in didn't happen, or something took place to rouse the Maestro out of his illusion. But regardless, in terms of the story, what Hickman does here is play on the arrogance of Doom and that he assumes that his barons are loyal to a fault. While some like Apocalypse follow Doom due to his belief of survival of the fittest and only the strongest should rule, others like Sinister have more ambiguous motives. And so all of this comes to a head in issue number 7 when we pick up with the fallout of the Prophet's revolt, growing beyond control. Amassing an army huge in size and composed of various characters from throughout Battleworld, some of whom have powers and some of whom don't, the revolution comes knocking on the door of Doomstat, where it's revealed that the Prophet is none other than Maximus the Mad. Now for those who are unaware, Maximus is the inhuman brother of Black Bolt, king of the Inhumans, but also possesses a genius-level intellect as a result of his exposure to the Terrigen myths. Like the other survivors of the Ultimate Universe and the main Marvel Universe, Maximus seems to be leading this revolution for the purpose of toppling Doom. Whether this is due to altruism and that he's trying to do the right thing or because he has his own motives is unknown, since Maximus himself is ambiguous when it comes to his motives for any particular situation. However, the schemes of Maximus are short-lived in the face of the combined efforts of Bar Sinister, Madeline Pryor and her goblins, and Apocalypse's forces. Seeing this as an opportunity to turn against Doom and end his rule, Sinister turncoats and along with Carol Danvers, their forces attack Madeline Pryor and her army of goblins. However, in the midst of their attack on Madeline and her goblins, Sinister is caught unawares by an explosion from behind, resulting in his head being severed from his neck, and when the smoke clears, he's greeted by the arrival of Holocaust. To sidetrack for a second, Holocaust was a being originating from the Age of Apocalypse story with unknown origins. While it was claimed that he was the son of Apocalypse, this is largely left ambiguous, and instead, he simply served as one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen. Furthermore, with Apocalypse arriving on the battlefield, the indication from Hickman seems to be that because Apocalypse was serving as a baron of the Age of Apocalypse territory, but was unable to move outside of his own boundaries, he quite literally grew bored of stagnation. As a result, he delights in the idea of being on a battlefield and testing the weak so that they can prove themselves strong or be destroyed. And so after a bit of banter between Apocalypse and Sinister himself, the battlefield is met with the arrival of the Thor Corps. However, rather than being there for the purpose of quelling the conflict, it's revealed that Jane Foster has incited revolution within the ranks of the Thor Corps after revealing the truth of Battleworld and that Doom is not a god, but an all-powerful being who pulled realities together after the collapse of the multiverse. As a result, the Thor Corps is in complete and total disarray, with civil war breaking out between those who believe Jane Foster and those who don't. Where the battle is short-lived, with Jane Foster, Ultimate Thor, and others coming out on top, the group takes their leave from Doomguard, at which point the entire battlefield descends into complete and total chaos. With the remnants of the Thor Corps fighting against the forces of Apocalypse and Madeline Pryor by allying themselves against Doom with Sinister and Carol Danvers, Susan Storm, Valeria Richards, and Black Swan watch alongside Doom as the situation unfolds. Now what Hickman does here is use the situation to provide dissent among the ranks of Doom's own house, and that to Susan Storm, the Thor Corps swore absolute allegiance to Doom and has obeyed every order without question. However, suddenly the Thor Corps has turned against Doom, indicating that they know something that Susan doesn't, which has caused them to turn against Doom and join the revolution. Now back on the battlefield, what Hickman does is provide those of us who are Apocalypse fans with a true depiction of his power, and that he single-handedly is able to take on a full contingent of the Thor Corps. If I can be a little bold here, this is particularly awesome to me because I've been an Apocalypse fan for years, and I felt like this display was a reflection of just how powerful Apocalypse is, and that between his shapeshifting, control of his atomic structure, and so on, he's someone that could easily stand against some of the strongest foes. However, in the midst of the fight, the battlefield is met with the arrival of Maestro and his army of Hulks referred to as the World Breakers, all of whom possess the same level of strength as World Breaker Hulk from the World War Hulk storyline. At this point, we transition to Project 42 with the ultimate and main Marvel versions of Reed Richards. What we learn is that this entire revolution, as it's being led by Maximus, including Sinister's betrayal and the arrival of the Hulks, has all been orchestrated by Ultimate Reed as a distraction that will allow himself, the main Marvel Reed, and Star-Lord to enter the Castle of Doom alongside Black Panther with the Infinity Gauntlet and in his rule. Now, the conversation between Reed Richards and Black Panther is of stupendous importance here, in that the two are extremely close friends by way of their intelligence, as well as the experiences that they've shared as part of the Illuminati, and so the two recognize that their mission is quite literally a last-ditch effort scenario, and that if they fail, they will likely die and Battleworld will continue under the rule of Doom. What's also funny here is the banter between Black Panther and Namor. As sworn enemies who both annihilated the other's empire during time runs out leading up to Secret Wars, the conversation between the two is filled with jibes as much as it is animosity, and so I think a legitimate argument could be made here that even if the two aren't the best of friends, at the very least, they share a common respect for one another. And so with the two standing before the wall separating Battleworld from the dead and Ultron robots, Black Panther destroys the wall and enters. Using the power of the Infinity Gauntlet, Black Panther is able to curb the zombies' desire for flesh and in the process, offer them a chance to use the Siege Courageous to eliminate the zombie plague from their bodies and start their lives anew. While some stand against the idea and that they view their lives as simple due to the fact that they simply exist to eat flesh and can't truly die, because all of them were heroes or superpowered beings in some form or fashion prior to contracting the zombie plague, Black Panther appeals to this aspect of their personalities by telling them that should they choose to use the Siege Courageous to start over, they can fight alongside Black Panther for glory and honor. So as we get into our video on Secret Wars Part 8, what we're going to do here is tie the events of previous issues into our discussion, which should allow for a smooth continuation of the story so far, but also cover any questions you might have along the way. So in the previous issue, we had talked about how following the death of Doctor Strange and the dispersing of the Earth-616 and Ultimate Universe heroes and villains across Battleworld, that over the course of several weeks, these various individuals had found their way into several camps, including Jane Foster and the Thor Corps, Carol Danvers and Mr. Sinister, and so on. However, these various threads all came together when Maximus the Mad, the Inhuman brother of Black Bolt, began amassing an army to lead a revolution against Doom. Picking up in the midst of the battle with the Hulks, Madeline Pryor's demons, and Sinister's clones, the story shifts its focus to Reed Richards from Earth-616, Reed from the Ultimate Universe, and Peter Quill. With a group intended to use the battle as a distraction to sneak into Castle Doom without anyone noticing, the trio set upon by one of the Hulks from Maestro's army. Where the actions of this particular Hulk result in the engines being destroyed, what this does is set up for the future encounter between 616 Reed and the rest of his family. From here, we jump to Maestro at Castle Doom and his attempts to draw out the good doctor. However, in the midst of his rant, he's met with the arrival of Ben Grimm. Now, in one of our previous videos, we had discussed how Thanos had discovered that the shield separating the Ultron robots, the zombies, and the Annihilation Wave from the rest of Battleworld was actually Ben Grimm himself. Where we learned that Ben's role as the Wall was a ploy by Doom to essentially force him out of the picture and allow the indoctrination of Susan Storm, Franklin Richards, and Valeria Richards. When Thanos had revealed the truth of his life prior to the collapse of the multiverse, Ben abandoned his role as the shield, allowing Thanos to muster his own army. And so what this section brings to us is the final stop of Ben's journey, and that because he's seeking revenge against Doom, he's effectively taking out everyone that he perceives to be in his way, including the Maestro. Furthermore, where Susan Storm recognizes who Ben is, while he served as the Wall, Doom used that time to modify her memories and lead her to believe that she had always been married to Doom and that Franklin and Valeria were his children. To this end, Susan viewed Ben as a family friend whom they had fought alongside when they first gained their powers, but to her mind, Reeds never existed. Now during this time, we also see the return of Terrax the Enlightened. For those of you who never saw my videos on Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, Terrax the Enlightened was a herald of Galactus from another reality, where the Illuminati of Iron Man, Black Bolt, Reed Richards, Doctor Strange, and Namor the Submariner attempted to save the Earth in the midst of an incursion. They had also imprisoned Terrax in the main Marvel Universe, where he escaped alongside Thanos during the multiversal collapse. And so his appearance here marks only a handful of times that he's actually shown up. But this appearance here is really just the result of his efforts to ally himself with Galactus. Now Galactus within the context of Battleworld is a little confusing and hasn't been fully fleshed out by Hickman. On one hand, he seems to be under the control of Franklin Richards, but whether this is truly a version of Galactus being controlled or simply a construct of Franklin using his ability to warp reality is unknown.
The only thing we really know here is that Terrax is considered an enemy of Doom, and as such, Franklin simply kills him as Ben Grimm watches on. And so with Ben stepping in to fight Franklin, the battle between the two of them is actually pretty even. Because this is largely a physical fight, the indication here is that even if this is Galactus simply under the control of Franklin, the full measure of his powers in controlling all things has been severely diminished. In addition to this, where Susan pleads with Doom to step in since ending this conflict is well within his abilities, he actually chooses not to. The reason why is revealed when Thanos arrives with the Annihilation Horde. To sidetrack for a second, the Annihilation Horde, or the Annihilation Wave as it was called prior to Secret Wars, is actually something that we haven't really talked about before. Led by a being named Annihilus, the Annihilation Wave first appeared during the Annihilation storyline and came with Annihilus's attempt to wipe out all life in the main Marvel universe. Where his attempts were unsuccessful and the story ended with his defeat, at some point during the collapse of the multiverse, the Annihilation Wave was collected by Doom and housed on Battleworld, although we never actually see this happen. Something to also take note of here is that during the fight between Ben and Franklin, Ben learns that to Franklin's mind, he and Valeria are the children of Susan and Doom. Stopping the fight and taking a few moments to focus on this subject, the full extent of Ben's understanding of the world around him comes into play when the actions of Doom modifying the memories of Susan, Franklin, and Valeria goes deeper than he expected. In addition to this, because Susan was such an intricate part of his life and he has no desire to fight her son, Ben stands down, but rather than Franklin doing the same, he actually destroys Ben. Now switching back to Susan and Valeria, in our previous videos we discussed how Valeria's intelligence allowed her to piecemeal the evidence together, leading her to realize that her memories in relation to Doom were a lie. Working to uncover the truth regarding what happened to her father between the collapse of the multiverse and the start of Secret Wars, while Valeria is still piecing things together, from her perspective, this all seems to be a show by Doom in an effort to continue his deceit and control over Battleworld. And so coming to the conclusion that Susan should be made aware of what's going on, Valeria intends to bring her mother to the location of Owen Reese so that he can inform her of the truth and everything that's actually going on. Transitioning back to Star-Lord, in the midst of his repair of the ship in order to ensure that he and the Reeds can escape once their mission is finished, he's met with the arrival of Black Swan. Now again, her character is one of many women during the multiversal collapse who went by the name Black Swan and served Doom in his efforts to kill off the multiversal versions of Owen Reese. But following the Great Collapse, she had escaped alongside Thanos and eventually made her way to Doom after the survivors of the Earth 616 and Ultimate Universe were dispersed across Battleworld. And so because Black Swan served Doom with unwavering loyalty prior to the end of the multiverse, during Secret Wars and on Battleworld, she serves with the same level of loyalty. Now where Peter talks a good talk, because Black Swan has super strength, telepathy, flight, and several other abilities, Star-Lord is outclassed in virtually every way. And so backed into a corner and with seemingly nowhere to go, Peter makes a last-ditch move by revealing a single splinter of wood. Throwing it at the tree of Yggdrasil from the remains of Asgard, it's revealed that the splinter was the last surviving piece of Groot. Merging itself with the World Tree, Groot effectively reforms and in the process, destroys the whole of Castle Doom. Now switching back to the battle and the arrival of Thanos with the Annihilation Horde, the confrontation between himself and Doom is actually pretty short here. What Hickman does is continue to build on the arrogance of Doom and that to him, the entire scheme of Thanos in collecting the Annihilation Horde was a waste, since Doom does not consider them to be of any importance. In addition to this, Doom is under the impression that Thanos can be bought and that Doom offers to make him the Baron of the Waste beyond the Wall, assuming that he stands down and walks away. However, Thanos himself also holds hubris in that he makes the case that where he once held absolute power in the form of the Infinity Gauntlet, rather than using it for his own personal desires, he used it to sit as judge for all things in existence. Now to be honest, Thanos is actually telling a bold-faced lie here. While his time with the Infinity Gauntlet did see him usurp the role of eternity as the supreme being in the universe, the entire basis behind his acquisition of power came from the desire to please Mistress Death. And so while there may be truth to what it is that he's saying here, the actual fact is that when digging a little deeper, Thanos' motivation for the Infinity Gauntlet was completely human, and that he was rooted in the pursuit of love. And so where he makes the argument that he doesn't need an Infinity Gauntlet to take out Doom, this claim proves to be a false one when Doom seizes Thanos and completely disintegrates him. Now if I can be a little dangerous here, I think Hickman is actually setting the stage for the return of Mistress Death. The reason being because as a physical embodiment of what it means to die, she was the only cosmic entity that couldn't be killed when the Beyonders began the conquest of wiping out all life. While I'm probably wrong about this, at the very least, I think the death of Thanos will go towards something bigger since this seems to be too much of a throwaway for a Hickman story. And so as this issue comes to an end, following the death of Thanos, the battlefield is met with the opening of the Siege Courageous with zombies pouring in from the gateway. Because the Marvel zombies are able to infect anyone with the zombie plague regardless of what power they possess, the immediate reaction is one of fear and that everyone could easily be converted if they were infected. But the mastermind behind these actions is revealed when Black Panther makes his presence known while wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, setting the stage for the confrontation and the end of Doom and Secret Wars issue number 9. So what I want to do here is continue our discussion on Secret Wars with the last and final issue. And something I also want to point out here is that if you're looking to get into the main Secret Wars series, including the lead up to everything that got us here, I have a playlist that you can find in the description of this video. Having said that, where issues 7 and 8 saw the coming together of various armies across Battleworld, some of which were designed to overthrow Doom and replace him, where others just wanted freedom, at the conclusion of issue number 8, Black Panther made his appearance alongside Namor the Submariner, brandishing the Infinity Gauntlet and leading a full contingent of Marvel zombies. And so picking up with issue number 9, we continue the confrontation between T'Challa and Dr. Doom. Now what's interesting about this is that initially, Doom attributes the surge of armies rising against him as the work of T'Challa, but as we discussed in one of our previous videos, this was actually orchestrated by the combined efforts of both versions of Reed Richards from the Earth-616 and Ultimate Universe respectively, with Maximus the Mad operating as the figure who could rally these armies together, allowing for both versions of Reed to operate from the shadows. In addition to this, Doom actually tries to sway them to his side by appealing to their roles as kings. What I mean here is that prior to the events of Time Runs Out, which saw Namor and T'Challa waging war against one another resulting in their kingdom's destructions, Namor ruled over Atlantis and T'Challa ruled over Wakanda, with each individual dealing with their own burdens, and that the outside world was constantly attempting to attain Wakanda's vibranium stores, while simultaneously encroaching on the ocean territories of Namor. However, T'Challa and Namor ultimately reject the olive branch offered by Doom, and using the Infinity Gauntlet's ability to control all things, turn Doom to glass with the intention of killing him. Now something to point out here is that what we're seeing at the moment is actually something we've never seen before. What I mean here is that historically, the Infinity Gauntlet has been used by various individuals in the past, but never against someone wielding the power of the Beyonders. Because the Beyonders were capable of eliminating the cosmic entities up to and including the Living Tribunal, the question being asked here is this: is Doom truly using the full power of the Beyonders? The reason why I ask this question is that during the events of Infinity War, at least assuming that Hickman considered it to be official material, the Living Tribunal had rebuked Adam Warlock's claim regarding the Gauntlet's incredible power by quite literally keeping him from being able to use it temporarily. And so using the transitive property, we can argue that if the Beyonders have the power to destroy the Living Tribunal, and the Living Tribunal had the power to quell the Infinity Gauntlet, then it stands to reason that the Beyonders are more powerful than the Infinity Gauntlet. However, the issue that we face here is that there don't actually seem to be any Beyonders left, and the last vestiges of their power rest in the hands of Doom by way of Molecule Man. And where Victor is able to reconstitute himself after Namor's attack, he greets T'Challa as an enemy with the two doing battle, meaning that unless we're provided a definitive answer at this part of the story, we don't know which one of the two is stronger. From here, Hickman switches our focus to both versions of Reed meeting Susan Storm and Valeria. Now this is of stupendous importance in that this is the first time Reed and Susan have met since the collapse of the multiverse and her presumed death. Where our previous videos established that Reed had become aware that Susan was alive and operating under the control of Victor, Hickman's portrayal of Reed and the inherent issue of his character during the events of Future Foundation are carried over to his reuniting with Susan. What I mean here is that during Hickman's run of Fantastic Four, the plot of the story revolved around Reed's disconnect with his family in the face of his love for science, technology, and solving the world's problems. With the conclusion of Future Foundation and the arrival of Franklin from the future solve this problem by illustrating the need for Reed to exist as a family man, the lack of affection towards Susan as it's displayed here, coupled with the anger he clearly shows towards Doom manipulations of Susan's mind, tells us that Reed still cares for his family, but in this instance, stopping Doom, stripping him of his power, and turning things to the way they were is of the utmost importance. To this end, when the question is asked by Susan as to who Reed truly is, rather than revealing himself as her husband, he simply states that he's there to fix things. Now at this point, we follow both versions of Reed into the secret lair of Dr. Doom, which is designed to house and contain Molecule Man. Now where Ultimate Reed was originally brought to us as a villain over the course of his publications in the Ultimate Universe, when the collapse of the multiverse occurred, he survived and encountered the main Marvel Reed. Hickman played a bit of deception in that where Ultimate Reed still demonstrated patterns of villainy, it was believed, at least by me anyway, that the villainous nature of his character had taken a back seat to the necessity of destroying Doom. However, this proves not to be the case in that when both versions of Reed encounter Molecule Man, Ultimate Reed traps the main Marvel Reed in a bubble of time. In addition to this, what we're told is that because of the nature of Battleworld, time was believed to flow forward only, with the inability to flow backwards, meaning that time travel to the past was impossible. The reason for this was due to the fact that Battleworld was created with the power of the Beyonders, and as beings who only existed linearly, meaning they could only move forward in time, the belief was that Battleworld functioned in the same way. Now, to be honest here, I would argue that this was the moment when Marvel deviated away from the idea of rebooting their continuity and chose to keep it the same. But this is something that we'll discuss later in the story. For now, the actions of Ultimate Reed trapping his counterpart in a sphere of time, causing him to travel backwards and forwards, is rooted in the idea that Ultimate Reed intends to eliminate his counterpart, or at the very least, immobilize him entirely. However, during the taunts, Owen Reed steps in by rematerializing Ultimate Reed into food that he can actually consume, effectively removing him from the picture. Now, the reason for why Molecule Man chose to intervene isn't really explained here, with the exception of a warning to the last remaining Reed that Victor Von Doom is coming. But I would argue that this is really just Owen Reed satisfying his hunger due to the vast amount of power he possesses, and in doing so, elected to kill the villain rather than the hero. But regardless, shifted the story back to Doom temporarily, we learn that the power of the Beyonders is indeed greater than the Gauntlet, and that Doom is essentially beating and toying with T'Challa. However, despite all his vaunted power and knowledge, it's not until T'Challa begins to taunt Doom that Victor realizes that T'Challa went into the conflict knowing it was impossible for him to win, and that all of the events that have transpired from the first battle at Castle Doom up until the current moment have all been a ruse designed to allow both versions of Reed the opportunity to locate Doom's source of power and attempt to destroy it. Now, traveling to Owen in an effort to stop Reed from whatever his machinations happen to be, in my opinion, this portion of the story provides us with one of the best Doom monologues in the history of Marvel Comics. What we're told is that where previously Doom had considered himself to be more capable than Reed based simply on their knowledge of science and technology or willingness to do what needed to be done, at the moment, Doom considers himself to be a better man due to his actions at the cusp of the multiverse's collapse. Because Doom, Strange, and Owen Reed stood at the brink of the multiverse's destruction, faced the Beyonders, overcame them, and took their power, Doom used the opportunity to create Battleworld, and in doing so, saved millions of beings from the fragments of alternate realities that hadn't yet been completely destroyed. As a result, because Reed was only able to save himself and a handful of others, Doom's taunts amount to calling Reed a coward and a failure due to his inability to save his own family. Now, where Doom attempts to kill Reed using his vast powers, the true nature of Owen Reed comes into play in that rather than operating simply as a source of Doom's power, Reed is more akin to a gatekeeper holding the keys and allowing Doom to use the power of the Beyonders. This particular bit comes to light when Owen bestows Reed with a power equal to Doom, allowing the two to engage in a grudge fight of sorts. Now, the battle between Reed and Doom as it's written here is absolutely amazing in that Hickman is giving us an instance where every ounce of frustration and anger is being laid bare. From the perspective of Doom, despite the various powers he's gained over the years and the struggles that he's endured, his life has never been an easy one. To sidetrack for a second, this is actually Hickman paying homage to Doom's attempts to save his mother's soul from Mephisto, with his various schemes over the years designed to acquire the power to do so. As a result, Doom's anger towards Reed and stopping his conquests over the years isn't rooted in the fact that he was defeated so much as it was rooted in the fact that Reed had essentially been stopping Doom from saving his mother. On the other hand, Reed's anger towards Doom is much simpler in that when the multiverse collapsed, rather than saving Susan, Franklin, Valeria, and Ben, keeping them whole and waiting for Reed once he arrived, instead, Doom attempted to take his place by stripping Reed's family of their knowledge of him and acting as Reed himself. Having said that, the battle between the two comes to a head when Doom makes the argument that Reed believes he's a better person and that if granted the power of the Beyonders, he would have made a better world rather than creating one of conflict and turmoil. Furthermore, when Reed forces Doom to admit that this is true, following this statement, Owen Reed makes the case that if both Doom and Reed agree that Reed would have made a better world, then the opportunity will be granted for Reed to prove it. And so, using his power to effectively wipe the slate clean, as Battleworld and all things within are completely eliminated, T'Challa seizes the time gem of the Infinity Gauntlet in a last bid to save himself. From here, things get a little hairy, but they get really interesting at the same time, in that we actually jump back to when the incursions first began, with a retelling of Avengers Volume 3, Issue Number 1. What this tells us is that while it's not shown, Reed seems to have somehow either stopped the incursions from happening, or else changed the outcome in that T'Challa has successfully traveled to the past, with the time gem being destroyed once he arrived. In addition to this, where the beginning of the incursions open with Black Panther witnessing an incursive Earth preparing to crash into the main Marvel Universe, followed by the appearance of Black Swan, all actions of T'Challa and his tribesmen appear to be the same here, with the exception of the fact that rather than witnessing an incursion take place, they witness the launching of a vessel into space for the purpose of exploration. From here, we jump to Miles Morales and Peter Parker, where Miles has a flashback to Owen thanking him for bringing a hamburger. What this tells us is that Miles Morales still remembers everything that had taken place during the events of Secret Wars on Battleworld. Where Owen had responded to Miles by stating that he owes him one, this favor seems to have come to fruition with Miles being thrown into the same universe as Peter, allowing for Miles to fight alongside his hero against various villains. And so as the story begins to come to a close, Hickman brings the conclusion of Secret Wars into full view by telling us how things have changed and setting the stage for the direction of the future of Marvel Comics. What we're told is that the incursions, the destruction of the multiverse, and the death of the cosmic entities all took place, meaning that as of this moment, with the exception of Galactus in the Ultimates, there don't seem to be any cosmic entities in the all-new, all-different Marvel universe. In addition to this, where the Beyonders were essentially defeated by Doctor Strange, Dr. Doom, and Owen Reese, rather than Doom using the power of the Beyonders to create Battleworld, the process of recreating all things fell to Reed, Franklin, and Owen Reese. With the explanation coming to Susan by way of Valeria, Owen Reese exists as a battery of sorts, and that he's the source of the Beyonders' power and the ability to create things. At the same time, Franklin is both a universal and multiversal constant, meaning that he's able to tap into the power of Owen Reese and use it to create universes. Finally, with Reed's vast intellect and experience, the abilities of Owen and Franklin are combined, allowing for Reed to instruct Franklin on how to engineer universes and send them off into the multiverse to function and grow on their own. And so what Hickman is essentially telling us is that where Reed is viewed as the savior of the multiverse due to Battleworld having never happened, in all new, all different Marvel, the reason why Reed, Susan, Valeria, and Franklin aren't present in any existing stories is due to the fact that they're quite literally engineering universes to recreate the multiverse, with each reality containing its own Molecule Man. Now in truth, this is really just an opportunity for Marvel to shuffle the Fantastic Four out of the landscape and keep them out of stories, similar to what was done with Nick Fury during Original Sin. This is evident in the fact that when Franklin asks if they're superheroes anymore, Reed responds by saying that their work won't stop at simply creating universes, and that all of these alternate realities have to be cataloged, monitored, and maintained until they grow to the point of becoming self-sustaining, after which time the Fantastic Four will return. Furthermore, in the closing pages of the story, it's revealed that throughout his entire ordeal from the start of the incursions, his journey to find his family, his battle with Doom, and Owen Reese resetting the events after the multiversal collapse, allowing for the recreation of all things, Reed himself had learned multiple lessons, and that the failure of Doom was his desire to hold on to everything that he had for fear of losing it, and that this fear was ultimately his downfall, and that he was essentially a man holding his life in his hands with no foundation. But as soon as the things that Doom loved were taken away from him, he was essentially a broken man. Using this as a platform, Reed intends to use the time engineering universes to connect with his family, connect with what it means to live, and rather than holding on so tight to the things he loves, simply allow the universe to grow and function as it should. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end, and let me know down in the comments section what you guys think about Secret Wars so far, and be sure to check that link in the description if you want to watch the whole thing. If you've been waiting all this time for me to finally get the last video out, and now you want to binge watch it, which I'm not against, that'd be awesome. But let me know, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.